Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we're talking about how to pick a league starter in Path of Exile. We're about 17 days away from the next league, which is usually like right around where I begin like my serious league start testing. I've already begun that for POE 3.22 Trial of the Ancestors, and I think when I start league testing, I really like to go through the same process over and over, and I want to kind of share that and kind of how you can help you figure out what your league starter should be, or at least how to not get baited by like trap league start build guides and what to actually look for and how to test yourself. So let's get started right away. I think this will be a pretty quick video. Remember, if you find any of this content helpful or you want to see more of the PoE League Start build guides and content we have coming up before League Start, make sure to click subscribe and leave a comment down below. It means a lot to me. Alright, so step one is test. This is the most important part of actually League Start testing, is to actually test. If you are just going into a POB, looking at an endgame build and saying, that's it, that's the build I'm playing, you're probably going to have a bad time. Minus players who are like super experienced, this is probably a pretty good way to like not have a great time leveling and getting to maps. So usually when I'm doing a league start test, I'm playing solo self-found, and I try to get to the build to at least maps that way. Once I get to maps, I'm usually more open to like buying something, seeing how certain items work on certain builds and how I can progress the build, but I at least want to be able to make sure I can get this build to like white, yellow maps pretty comfortably without much investment at all. So that is the big thing for me. And the key thing to keep in mind with testing is League Start is more than just endgame. It's really hard to come down from like the highs of like I have the best character in the previous league and come back down to I have nothing again. And remembering that is actually what happens is a little bit to think about. Step number 2 for me is to think about the upcoming league mechanic. We got pretty lucky this league in that we got an announcement pretty early on what the league mechanic is going to be. But in general, I think about, is my build good for the league mechanic? So if for example, in this league, we're going to be in an enclosed area for the league. We don't know if we're fighting bosses. We don't know if we're fighting like a lot of small enemies. I guess it's somewhere in between. But this is definitely a league where I'm going to be focused on trying to find a build that's good at controlling an area, because you're going to be basically enclosed in an area and forced to do some sort of mechanics and killing enemies inside of a closed space. Movement speed, not super important for the league mechanic, at least from what I can tell. Second part of the league mechanic is you gotta think about, do you care? Some people just don't like the league mechanic, or they don't care. They want to get to like a certain other content. They want to do bossing or mapping, and they don't really want to interact with the league mechanic. That's completely up to you. I, for one, like the league mechanic, so I try to make my build around the league mechanic and make sure I can do it well. So that's really a personal decision, and it's going to shape how you decide on a league starter. And I think it's super important to think about and try to figure out at least a little bit of what the league mechanic is going to be like, and if your build is capable of doing it. Best example I have of this recently is Sanctum League. Ended up being that if you were playing like a melee build, you had a really awful time in Sanctum League. So that's something to keep in mind if you're going to be playing the Sanctum mechanic that's coming back in 3.22. Next thing for me, kind of going along the lines of the league mechanic, is choosing your content. For me, choosing a league starter is about two things. It's about your build, what's fun for you to play, and what do you like. And then second thing is choosing what kind of content you like. What content is important to you is probably the most important question here. If you pick a build and then you end up choosing content you don't like, you're still not having fun. So you want to pick a build you like, content you like. So why is it important to pick your content early? So for me personally, I enjoy certain types of content in this game. For me, it's like Expedition, Legion, things like that. I want to make sure that my build is capable of doing the content. Some builds are better at blasting maps, some builds are better at doing bosses, some builds are good at certain types of content. This is where you really need to think, will my build be able to do the content I want to do? And even more important than that, will I be upset if I can't do some of the content? So when you're doing your build, you gotta think about what kind of content do I like to do. For me, Expedition is always like a good league starter for me. If I look at a build and I say, man, this build's gonna have a problem doing Expedition, it's like an immediate cross off my list of a build that I'm not gonna play. So choose your content and just make sure the build you're testing matches up with your content. And actually, ideally, even test this content with your build and see how it goes. Next thing up is avoid unknowns. Generally, this is like reworked ability/classes. There are exceptions. Occasionally, you'll see a new build, a new item, a reworked class that comes in is completely broken, and it's obviously broken. So usually this happens if you see a bunch of YouTube videos about the same thing over and over, talking about how something's broken and then there's no patch about it. That's usually something to jump onto. For example, last league, Pathfinder got a rework, ended up being extremely strong. I missed the boat on that one, but it wasn't a playstyle I was super interested in at the time either, so works out. I played the reworked Val Absolution last league, ended up being a fantastic ability. A lot of people just avoided it because they didn't know what it was going to do. You take the gamble. If you are going to play like one build for an entire league, though, this is not a gamble I would take. Other things to look out for is like changes to uniques. A lot of times they'll mention like changes to drop rates. Example that I believe was last league when Devouring Diadem was changed. They changed the drop rate. That means the drop rate got nerfed. You can't make builds around that anymore. And then changes to unique items. Unique items get changed the most in the game. So if a unique item gets severely buffed or severely nerfed, it's good to be aware of that and figure out if that affects your build in any way, shape, or form. Always be ready for the patch notes. Patch notes, luckily for us, are always like a week before the league starts. So even if there is a major shakeup in the patch notes, you have time to test out the class again with the changes. Or at least building around the changes. 5 for me is POE Ninja. It's an excellent tool. I always jump back to like day 3 of the previous league and see what the most popular builds were. I don't base my build choice on popularity though. I use it as like kind of a measuring stick. I try to go back and look back. Was anybody playing my build at league start? Why? Why not? Why were some builds popular? Why were they not popular? So, and then the follow-up thing you can look on POE Ninja is what uniques do I need and how expensive were they? So I'm gonna do like a quick little POE Ninja deep dive. This is the POE Ninja default like builds page, I guess. So you see at the top I set Crucible, and I go back in the time machine to day 3. Default on latest snapshot, I always go for like day 3 or 4 to try to see what people are doing 3 days into the league. Which builds were really popular. You can come in here and see which classes are popular. Juggernaut was most popular because of Righteous Fire. As you can see, Righteous Fire was the most popular league start. So we had Righteous Fire, Bone Shatter. So the first 2 builds were like Juggernaut builds. Then we had Fire Trap, Toxic Rain. A lot of builds are made popular by other content creators and then kind of falls off from there. So if you come over here and... So I played Absolution last league. Go over here, it was 0.5%. A lot of people will just look at this and be like, oh, this was not good. Val Absolution wasn't a good league starter, nobody played it. Not true, I played it, it was fine. So you gotta think about popularity. I would definitely... It's kind of hard to explain how this works. But if you come in here and you see a build that was like really like exceptionally unpopular, it's kind of something I would avoid. Or at least like definitely be sure of and do a lot of testing to make sure it's good. Basically, the less popular the build is, the more testing that needs to be done on your own. The second thing to look at on POE Ninja is the economy. I always go in here to look and see how expensive items were when the league started. So best example of this, I know that Wilma's Requital is really popular for Ballista Totem builds last league. So I can come in here and I can figure out, okay, Wilma's Requital, it's 8.2C. Like, oh, that's fine. I can afford that. You can actually click on this and go one step further. You can see that it started at 116C on the first 2 days of the league and then fell down pretty quickly. But if you're trying to get this build online in the first 3 days, it's going to cost you way more than it is the rest of the league. And it's an important thing to remember. Okay. Step 6 is test again. So I'm a huge proponent of making sure to test out a build is good. Go back, the last couple slides, go through all those questions in your head. Was the content right? How expensive is the build? How popular is the build? It has been tested before. Were there any changes in the patch notes? Go through all that again with your build in mind. And give it one more test. Make sure to flesh out any of those questions. You're good to go. You basically want to know your build inside and out prior to league start. It makes league starting way easier. You know what items prioritize, you know what stats prioritize on those items. And the big thing is do more than look at a POB. If all you do is look at endgame POB, you're probably going to have a bad time. Make sure you know the leveling process and like scaling from beginning mapping to endgame mapping. Lastly, have fun. Pick a playstyle you like, pick content you like, choose 2 things that work together. I always say this, choose happiness over optimal. If you choose a build that's like 5% less optimal than the absolute best build, but you're gonna have more fun, you probably end up playing the game more often and making up for that 5% like less optimal in other ways. So that is my league start testing guide. If you enjoyed this content and you stuck it out this long, click the like button, click subscribe. We got more content to come, and check out the Twitch stream down below. We're doing a ton of league start streams and testing out new things, so that would mean a lot to me as well. Other than that, I will catch you next time. See ya.